How much will the QX60 cost and how does it compare to the competition? Well, before we talk about that, we should again cover the Nissan Plus mission of the new QX60. Nissan has basically said that Infiniti going forward is going to be luxury Nissan, I guess you could say, rather than trying to differentiate it more from the brand like we've seen with Lexus and Toyota. So they're calling it maybe a little bit more like Acura, perhaps a little bit more like Buick for their upcoming product line. And I think the pricing does reflect that. It starts at $47,350. That is significantly less than a Volvo, an Audi, a BMW, a Mercedes. Also less expensive than the Acura Mdx, but a little bit more than a Buick Enclave. Now bear in mind that Infiniti has not changed their warranty and dealer structure just yet. So if you're looking for a more premium dealer experience, you're looking for a slightly longer warranty, some of the extra that you're paying for the QX60 doesn't go just into the nicer interior components, the different style. It also goes into that different dealer network and the longer warranty as well. So if you're looking for a Pathfinder that I think is more attractive, that's a solid reason to upgrade into the QX60. Now let's talk about comparisons. Obviously the first competitor here has to be the best seller in this segment, the Acura Mdx. The Mdx has pretty similar room on the inside and outside to the QX60, but it's not as family friendly, and that's something that I've always been surprised by, because one logical reason to buy the Mdx over a Lexus RX, often a long-time rivalry there, is that the Mdx has the third row ability. Theoretically, it could be more family friendly. But if you have kids in child seats, and those child seats are latch anchored in a position, you can leave them in position, tilt and slide the second row forward to get easy access to the third row. You cannot do that in the Mdx. Whether or not this feature matters really depends on your stage in life. Are you empty nesters? Do you not have kids? Do you not want kids? Do you just have kids but never use the third row? If any of those situations apply, it's not really going to matter. But if you have kids in child seats or booster seats, and those can be latch anchored in place, even if you're also using the shoulder strap on something like a booster seat, but you undo the shoulder strap, you can tilt slide that forward, get easy access to the third row. If you use the third row a lot and you have those child seats, that's going to make a big difference. Now, on the performance and handling front, actual performance is pretty similar. In terms of 0 to 60 times, the Mdx is a little bit faster than the QX60. It's not a huge difference. Handling, however, that is a huge difference. The QX60 comes across as a little bit less refined, a little bit less polished, a little bit more ponderous, I guess you could say. There's certainly more body roll, less feel going on. I was really surprised that Infiniti is really conservative about sending power to the rear axle. So under a lot of driving conditions, even when you're driving the car a little bit harder, most of the power is going to the front axle, 98, 99% in those situations, if not 100%. You really have to lose traction, be going quite slowly, or be on a rougher road surface for the system to suddenly send power to the front. And that's why I found on some roads, it actually was more fun to drive in snow mode, kind of a weird twist. Front-wheel drive model to front-wheel drive model, you're probably not going to notice too much difference between these vehicles, but in the all-wheel drive trims, you certainly are, because the Mdx not only will send more power to the rear axle, it also has a torque vectoring rear axle, so it's going to definitely feel more nimble out on your favorite winding road. It's going to drive a lot smaller than the QX60, and the QX60 feels about as big as it is, or perhaps actually feels a little bit larger than it really is at some times out on the road. Next up, we have the Lincoln Aviator. This is a really good deal in this segment. Rear-wheel drive is standard. It starts at $52,840, so it is more expensive than the QX60, but you get a 400 horsepower twin turbo 6-cylinder engine and a slick 10-speed automatic transmission, absolutely standard in that model. All-wheel drive is obviously going to bump that price tag up, and by the time you've added some of the standard feature content that we find in the Infiniti, you might go a tiny bit higher, but the Aviator comes very well equipped in that base model. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the Aviator, don't get the plug-in hybrid. It's really not terribly smooth. It's the same sort of hybrid system that we find in the F-150, which also is not as smooth as some of the other Lincolns. If you're considering one of the other Lincolns, like a Lincoln Corsair plug-in hybrid, the Aviator is not going to feel anything like it because it's a completely different system. The other thing you should know about the Aviator is that the 2023 model year vehicle is going to be the same as 2022. It is starting to feel a little bit old on the inside. A thorough refresh is expected for 2024, when it's probably going to get much larger screens in the dashboard. Next up, we have the Buick Enclave, specifically the mid-level trims or the top-end Aviator trim. This is really the same sort of thing as the QX60. It's obviously related to the Chevy Traverse, but it has a different interior, different exterior, but shares a lot of the underpinnings, just like the QX60 and the Pathfinder. The Enclave goes a little bit lower than the Infiniti, however, so it starts at $42,800 because there's less standard equipment on that model. It is, however, absolutely enormous. over 113 inches of combined legroom, over 23 cubic feet of cargo capacity, and on the outside, it's over 205 inches longer. So it's definitely going to be harder to park in some of those urban and suburban situations, but it's going to be very, very roomy on the inside. If you're not a fan of a minivan, but you need that kind of interior room, you should definitely take a look at the Buick. Now, it's not going to be quite as child seat friendly as the QX60, so another win there for the Infiniti. But on the top end, the loaded Buick Aviator actually ends up a little bit less expensive, right around $60,000 versus about $64,000 for the QX60. So value proposition wise, the Buick is going to be a solid option. In terms of driving and handling, I do find the Buick to be pretty soft, but I think it comes across a little bit better sorted than the QX60, or at least it handles as I expect it to, and the QX60 sometimes confused me a bit. Just the way the suspension is tuned is not exactly my favorite. Make sure you spend a reasonable amount of time in that Infiniti. Make sure that suspension will work for you. Infiniti's 3-row crossover has never been the most exciting entry in this segment, and that certainly continues with this generation. But it has long had the promise of a roomy, spacious, pragmatic interior, and that certainly does continue, and you no longer have to worry about the CVT if that's something that you weren't a fan of. The engine has been pretty reliable in the past. The 9-speed automatic transmission, it may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I suspect you won't even notice it after a while. The QX60 really shines when it comes to family friendliness, third row usability, and interior practicality. It has a nice wide third row, something that we don't find in most of the competition. But on the downside, handling and driving dynamics definitely fall apart a little bit compared to something like the Mdx, the XC90, obviously the German competition as well. Which features are more important to you? Do you care more about the driving dynamics, or do you care more about the interior practicality, family practicality, etc. that we find in the QX60? Be sure and let me know down there in the comment section. Find us over at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those other social places. I'll see all of you next week.